Welcome to Real Estate Game Changers Radio, featuring real estate trendsetters and industry influencers, sharing tips and strategies to help home buyers and home sellers get the most out of their next real estate transaction. Now, here's your host, Suzanne Doyle-Ingram.
This is Suzanne Doyle-Ingram with Real Estate Game Changers Radio, and I have a great guest today. I'm so excited to be interviewing this man. He is such a success story. He really and truly is the epitome of how to succeed in real estate. So listen carefully. He, in the first year of his career, he sold $3.7 million in real estate and basically doubled it every year after that. He now has a team of, let me see here. Danny, how many people on your team?
There's 16 licensed brokers on my team. 16
people on his team, which is amazing, and he's done it all in just, a few short years. And I would really like to welcome to the show Danny Lewis.
Thanks so much for having me, Suzanne. It's an honor to be here.
I'm excited to have you on the call today because you have such a great story. I just love it. And I should mention to our listeners, you're in Chicago, Illinois, which is a great city. So tell us the story about how you got started in real estate. It's such a great story.
Sure thing. So before I was in real estate, I worked in PR and advertising, and all my life I'd worked in sales. My grandfather was a salesman himself, and he always told me that I was made for sales, and I believed him. And so about, I want to say 6 years ago now, my grandfather, who was 92 at the time, decided to move from his house to a retirement home. He was getting to the age where he, was having trouble taking care of himself. And as a family, we wanted people around him to make sure that, he was well taken care of. And at the time, he was 92, and he was going to sell the house himself. And to be honest with you, Suzanne, he probably could have. I mean, he still had all his wits about him. He was still a people person. But, he wasn't very adept in taking phone calls, and I can guarantee you he did not have an email address. So
really?
I was working a PR job at the time, and he told me that he was thinking about selling his house. And I'd watch shows like House Hunters, and I'd watch shows like $1 Million Listing, and I saw all these real estate agents making all this money and doing what I thought I could be doing, which is basically interacting with people and selling. And I said, give me a shot, let me try. And my grandfather at the time, luckily, gave me that chance, and that was my first listing. It was a for sale by owner. It was my grandfather's house, and I just began showing it, and it was an amazing experience, just to be able to set up appointments, meet strangers, give them tours. And in the beginning, I was very amateur about it, but over time, just like anything, when I kept showing the place over and over again, I started to get more and more comfortable. And one day I was showing it, and a real estate agent came in. And to be honest, there were a lot of real estate agents that came to that listing. And now that I'm looking back on it, I realized because they were there, because they were trying to get their physical listing for themselves. And there was this one agent. Yeah,
that's what you guys do.
Exactly. And I realize that now. But there was this one agent who kind of just let down that guard after the first 5 minutes. She kind of realized that it was going to be my listing, and she kind of just gave me a heart-to-heart, and she said to me, you know what, you should be doing this for a living. And I'll never forget that, and I'll never forget her. And I took her advice, and after my grandfather's place sold, after about 2 or 3 months, I got my license, and that was the summer of 2011. And I became an official broker in October 2011, and the rest is history.
That's amazing. So it's only been 5 years, and you have grown your company so big. And, I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that you already were really a business savvy. You knew what you wanted, and you probably set some goals and just said, this is what I'm doing, right?
Exactly. I would say the background in PR and advertising had a huge help. It really taught me how to brand myself. It taught me how to interact with strangers, and it really taught me the main lesson of selling that I still use to this day, which is, you want to sell someone how you would sell yourself. And I'm a very skeptical person myself. I've always been skeptical of salespeople. I've always been skeptical of someone who's trying to convince me into something. And I think I've taken that attitude and learned how to use that to my benefit when I'm dealing with my own clients.
You try to get to, ask them questions to figure out what they truly want.
Exactly. I mean, I would think about if I was in their position and I was talking to me, a realtor, what would I be skeptical of? What would I want to know? What would I think is really going on? And I try to get the answers to those questions before my clients even think that, to not only, show them that I know what I'm doing, but to also gain their trust as well.
I think that's a good point, and it's a really fine balance because on the one hand, you know so much more about real estate than your clients, but you don't really want to come across that you know more than them. So you have to kind of balance it. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's
I think about before I was in real estate, did I know, what attorney review was? Did I know what an inspection was? And the answer is no. I didn't know the answer to any of that stuff. So every single client that I deal with, I try to take in that same kind of mindset, which is starting from step one. And that's, one of the reasons that I think I do so well with first-time home buyers is because, I treat them like, someone who has never bought a home before, which is the case, and try to explain the process as clearly as possible.
Oh, yeah, that's great. And really take care of them, make them feel like you've got their back.
Exactly.
I think it's so scary. I mean, luckily for me, when my husband and I bought our first home, my mother was our realtor. And that's why I love real estate. I grew up in the business. My mom was a realtor for 25 years. And so I felt very supported. And but the problem is sometimes working with family is then she would walk into a house and say, "Nope, this isn't the one for you," before we could even basically get in the front door. So tell me about working with first home buyers. I mean, it must be such a thrill to hand over the key to a young family.
Yeah, it is. So, full disclosure, I'm 34 years old. So my age bracket, the people who are in the early 30s, later 20s, they're into that point now where they don't need to be renting anymore. They probably had their full-time career for a couple of years now. They probably feel comfortable in their job and they know what they'll be doing. So to be honest, most of the clients and most of the people I work with are around my age range. And I think that really helps. And in the sense of not only just, how I interact with them and communicate with them, but also how I interact with them technology-wise as well. There's a lot of tools that I use that I think agents who have been around for a longer time aren't using. And, that goes from, just texting, emailing is obviously pretty basic, but, texting clients to, not really as much calling. Everything is basically done via, text, Facebook Messenger. There's a lot of different ways to get in touch with them. And I think that really helps. The other thing that really helps, too, is, the fact that my clients are also very technologically adept. They are really, they know how to use DocuSign. They can respond to emails within 5 minutes. So I think that has a lot to do with it, is the fact that, I'm kind of in the same wavelength with my clients in terms of technology and in terms of communication. So I think that helps. And, like you said, too, I've only been doing this 5 years. So I still am, in a sense, always learning. And I think I will be until, the day I die. I'll be always learning in real estate. There's never a deal that I've done that's exactly the same as the next. And I think that every real estate agent out there can relate to that. But, I'm still in a phase where I'm 5 years into it. So I still kind of remember what it was like to not know much about real estate and to not really know about the process. So I feel like that might kind of come across when I work with first-time home buyers, because I make sure, that I am 100% clear about what the process is and what to expect. And I think that they react to that well.
Yeah, but I think even though you've only been in the business for 5 years, you've had so many transactions that you really probably hardly anything can surprise you anymore. Well, I guess I shouldn't say that. I don't
don't jinx it.
Yeah, sorry. What I meant was.
But no, there are always things that surprise me. There are always deals that have, something come up that I've never experienced before. But every single time, and this is what I always tell my agents as well, every time something does come up that I've never experienced before, I write it down. And I think about what that experience taught me and use it moving forward for any other experiences that could possibly be like it.
That's good. Very good. That's a really good point about writing it down. That's a good tip for our listeners. Because, you think you're going to remember everything. And believe me, now that I'm getting older, I think, my kids always say, "Oh, remember this?" I think, I don't remember that at all. So that's a really good point.
Yeah, for me, I'm a visual person. So if something happens to me, I always try to write it down so I can remember it down the road and use that to my advantage.
Good point. Very good point. And I did have a note here that I wanted to mention that you were actually you're a top 1% agent in the whole entire state of Illinois, which is really, really amazing. And that's since 2012. So you came out of the gate and you just, went for it. It's amazing. I want to ask you, can you give me an example of, I'm just curious, getting back to these people your age, I have a feeling that nowadays a lot of young people, younger than me, so, in their late 20s or 30s, sometimes they don't even realize that they can buy a house. They're spending so much money in rent, and they probably think, oh, I can't buy a house. So can you tell me a story about someone you've worked with that you helped kind of get out of that mindset and get into a home?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. And you're exactly right. I think most people don't realize that their rent is more likely more than their mortgage payment's going to be. They just don't have or have never had someone who's explained that to them. Unfortunately, in school and in college, I don't know about you, but there was never a class in my school that taught people about mortgages and, down payments and how the process all works. So I would say there's not even a specific story. I'd say every single day I deal with people who basically don't understand or know anything about the real estate process. Most of the time that I get calls from first-time home buyers, they don't really understand or know how a mortgage works. They aren't pre-approved. They haven't even started that process. So what I do is I align myself with some great lenders, some guys that have built and gotten a lot of trust from me, and I've gotten a lot of trust from them, and basically work with them to explain to them the entire process of the home sale, from the down payment to what to expect in terms of, insurance and taxes and assessments and all that kind of stuff. I think to answer your question, the best way to really approach someone who's never really dealt with a mortgage before or buying a home is to get a great team around you, to find some lenders that are on the same wavelength as you, same mindset, who can explain very clearly to these first-time home buyers exactly what they're getting into and kind of team up with them. And not only that, in the sense of having a lender help you out in terms of teaming up, but you could also, work with a lender to advertise as well, to have first-time home buyer seminars, to do open houses with you. So, to answer the question, the way that I mostly deal with explaining, the mortgage process, or to explain to a first-time home buyer, how much different their mortgage payment is going to be than their rent payment, I team myself up with some great lenders, and we work together to, make the process as clear as possible to these first-time home buyers.
That sounds great, and really to open their eyes to possibilities.
Exactly, and that's what a teamwork does,
Yeah. That must be such a great feeling to meet someone who's, professional like you say, they've been in their job for a little while, and you open their eyes to, hey, you know what? Why don't you just go talk to this mortgage broker? You might qualify for a mortgage. And they go, what? Really? and then a few months later, you're handing them a set of keys, and that feeling they get, it must be so exciting for them.
It really is. And, the market, the way it is right now is, and from my experience in Chicago especially, is that it's a lot easier for lenders to give out money than it was, say, 3 or 4 years ago. There's a lot more programs. Yeah. People are shocked that they could put a 5% down payment down and still be able to close on a property. So I think that has a lot to do with it, too. I was very lucky. And I was lucky because I got my license and started doing real estate at probably one of the worst times in American history of real estate. It was 2011. You didn't know any better. No, exactly. It was 2011. The economy was slowly coming back. I would say, after the crash in 2008, 2009. By 2011, prices were still ridiculously low. There were still a ton of foreclosures out there and short sales. And that's when I got into real estate. And, looking back or looking now, it's crazy to think, wow, how and why did I get started in one of the absolute worst times in American history of real estate? But now, it's something that I'm so grateful for. Because what happened was, because of the fact there weren't as many listings out there, I got to work with a ton of home buyers, first-time home buyers when I started in 2011. There were a lot of people out there who were looking to buy, and there weren't as many sellers at the time. What that meant is, over time, these people who I worked with and bought properties with after the next 3 or 4 years, now they're selling, and they're selling at amazing rates compared to what they bought. So I probably look like a hero to these people, because when I bought with them, they bought at the rock bottom prices. And now in Chicago. In this last year, inventory has been its lowest since 2007. These sellers are getting amazing deals. Just really quickly, a real quick story. I had a buyer who I bought a place for her, or with her, I should say. I didn't buy it for her, in 2012. And it was a one-bed with 2 parking spots in Lakeview, which is a really nice location out here in Chicago. And we paid $190 for it. And it had 2 garage parking spots, which was really valuable in Lakeview because there's not a lot of parking.
That's amazing.
Last
You
year,
get a condo for $190. That's awesome.
Exactly. It was crazy. I mean, at the time, it had been on the market for around 60 or 70 days. It wasn't staged at all. It didn't really look great. The agent was a little bit kooky as well. So it was an interesting sale at the time. But 3 years later, I looked in that building and I looked at recent sales, and one beds were selling for $240, $250.
Oh, that's great.
So I called up my client. I explained to her the exact situation. She had just gotten married, so at this point, her and her husband were ready to move on to a better place, and we sold her place last year for $260,000. That's a $70,000 profit in 3 years, and with basically no work. She put in a new sink in the bathroom, and that was pretty much it. So, I was
amazing.
so lucky.
Yeah.
I was so lucky to, have started at the time I did because, I got to work with her and buy at a time when it was at the absolute rock bottom. And now that the market's gotten better and I've understood real estate a lot more because I've, obviously done a lot more transactions since then, now, I look like a hero to them because of the fact that they sold for $70,000 more only 3 years later after not doing a lot of work to it.
That's amazing. And I think with first home buyers, one thing they think about is, okay, yeah, this is, I'm getting an asset. This is great. This is what I've heard about. But then they don't realize how much that can grow. I mean, that's incredible, that amount of money in such a short period of time. There's no other investment where you're going to get that.
Exactly. And she was a first-time home buyer at the time, and, she brought her family with, and I met everyone, and her mom and her dad and her boyfriend, her now husband's mom and dad. And, it was just so cool to hear about their experiences from when they were buying, and interest rates were, 18%, 17%. And, from that to now, it's an amazing, it's amazing transition from what's happened. And just the fact that I've also gained their trust now because now their kids have, sold their place for $70,000 more 3 years later. It really helped me in my confidence that I do know what I'm doing and that, I can really help my clients.
Yes, absolutely. You gave her great advice getting into that condo for sure. So, tell me a little bit more about the Chicago real estate scene. What's the average price right now for a home?
In Lincoln Park, so there's 2 types of ways to look at homes in Chicago. There's either you look at it as a condo or you look at it as a single-family home. The single-family homes in Chicago are obviously a lot more expensive. Land is very expensive in Chicago. Lincoln Park, which is one of the primary areas that I work in, which would be compared to like a Manhattan in, New York, a Beverly Hills in LA, mostly just like the nicest, most expensive part of Chicago. Nice. Land itself, which is 25 by 125 feet, which is, not a huge lot, but that's the standard lot size in Chicago. Land itself just goes for $500,000 or $600,000 out here. So when you're looking at single family homes in Chicago, it's going to be a minimum of $1 million, a minimum. And that's usually, at $1 million, it's not going to be a huge home and it's going to have to need some updates for sure. But that's single family homes. If we're talking about condos, which is, what the majority of people in Chicago live in, 2 beds, I would say range anywhere from $350,000 to $500,000. You can get a pretty nice 2 bed for $500,000 in Chicago. And then a 1 bed anywhere from $200,000 to say $300,000. And 3 beds are anywhere from, on the low end, $400,000, on the average range around $600,000 or $700,000. So if you're looking for a single family home in Chicago, you better start saving. There's no question it's going to be expensive. And by the way, I'm talking about when I say Chicago, I'm talking about like a 3-mile radius outside of the Loop, which is the center of the city, 3 to 5 mile radius. Now, if we go further out to the suburbs, then it's going to be different. Then you can get a single family home for $200,000, $300,000, but you're going to be about 10 miles away from the city. But, if you want to stay in Chicago proper, it's going to be expensive if you want a single family home. That being said, if you want a 2 or 3 bed condo, it is a lot more affordable. And we actually do have some pretty good school districts, to raise your family in.
That's good.
So,
good. Now, tell me a little bit about your team. You've got 16 members on your team, which is so amazing. And by the way, on your website, I have to tell you, they're a very good-looking team. You look like a bunch of models, like a modeling agency.
Yeah, we're a very diverse group. It's awesome to have this. So
your staff parties.
So something I realized very early in real estate is that it's not something that you could do by yourself. And if you try to do it by yourself, it's going to be very tough, especially when you're starting out. I was very lucky. I was referred to a mentor to me. His name is Sandesh, and he basically taught me everything I knew about real estate. He was a referral to me from one of my friends who I went to college with, and he mentored one of my friends, and my friend said, you know what, he's in real estate, you should get in touch with him, and I did. And, I met Sandesh, and within the first week I met him, it was amazing timing again. He went from being the CEO of Century 21 down here in Chicago to deciding, you know what, I want to do my own brokerage. I want to do my own thing. And he went from mentoring and training 30 to 40 agents at a time to just me. And that's something that I'll never forget. So, the fact that this person, mentored me, taught me everything I knew and didn't ask for anything in return, it kind of, changed my entire attitude about real estate. It's kind of like, if you go to Starbucks or if you go to McDonald's and the person in front of you pays for your coffee, you're not just going to take that coffee and walk away. You're going to want to pay for the person behind you. And that's how I think of it in terms of a real estate team. I had someone who went out of his way to help me, didn't ask for anything in return. And if I took that knowledge and just kind of kept it with myself, it would be selfish and it probably would lead to my demise because I wouldn't be able to, branch out and help people.
Yeah.
So I took that experience and I basically am paying it forward myself, but I'm paying it for 16 people. So it's a little bit different. I had that person who kind of, showed me the way, mentored me and trained me. And I thought, I could be doing the same thing myself with newer agents as well. And that's how it started. It started with 2 agents. I was at the time at a different brokerage and I signed up for Zillow and Trulia advertising and Realtor.com advertising. I started to get all these leads. And I realized that, I was spending so much time chasing around most of these leads that there were some of them that were just sitting in my inbox. And I'm spending all this money and wasting it, in my opinion, because these leads are just sitting there, not doing anything. Yeah. So I thought to myself, if I was a brand new agent, I would love to have some of these leads. I would love to have someone who can show me how to take these leads and turn them into clients and close them. And that's how the whole process started, is because I had a lot of business to give, but I couldn't handle it all myself. So I recruited 2 newer agents at the agency that I was with at the time and started the Lewis Real Estate Group. It was basically, a small group of people. We would meet once or twice a month, talk about our deals. I would go through a initiation phase with them where I would explain to them everything, my step from step 1 to the last step in terms of closing, how I got these clients, what my script is, what I say, how I approach the situation, and train them to that so, they have that same confidence too. But I always want to make sure that they put their spin on it as well. I don't want them to use my exact words. I don't want them to say exactly or do exactly what I do. I want them to take my philosophy and kind of use it in their own. And that's what they did. And 2 turned to 4, and 4 turned to 8, and 8 is now 16. And we're a dynamic team now. We're the number 1 team at my agency. We do listings together, which is an amazing experience for me because I have a lot of listings, and as you know, it's not possible to be able to show every single listing at the same exact time. It's not physically possible to be able to do that. Yeah. So I set up co-listings with my team, and basically my team members co-list these properties with me and take them on as their own. They're new agents, so for them to get the experience of having their own listing, being able to do open houses, being able to have the experience of confirming showings with agents and doing the tours with them and learning how to talk to the agents, how to react to different clients' reactions. All that kind of stuff is invaluable. Anyone can teach you anything in a classroom. You could sit there and a teacher can tell you all day exactly how it's going to be, but there's nothing like getting the actual experience of doing it. And that's kind of the philosophy I use with my team. I throw them in the deep end, and I tell them in the beginning whenever I meet them for the first time is, I'm not your mom. I'm not going to be following up with you every single second of the day, making sure that you're supposed to be doing what you're doing. I'm trusting that you are a hustler and you know exactly, what you should be doing. And I also warn them that I'm going to be throwing you right into the deep end. I'm not going to be having you sit in a classroom. I'm not going to tell you over and over again things that are going to happen. I'd rather have you go out there and experience it. And I think that's
great.
an extremely valuable experience for them. And they, in my opinion, are very lucky to have that experience just like I was. I had Sandesh who basically threw me into the deep end and said, here are some clients of mine. Go take them out. Let me know how it goes. And at the time I was nervous because I didn't have too much of an idea of what to expect. But after doing it and after experiencing it, it just changed my perspective on everything.
That's fantastic. So tell me, how many listings do you have right now?
Right now, because we are in October, not as many. Right now I have 3 active listings, but today that's 2 of my listings are closing, which is great. I'd rather be here, obviously, talking to you. But yeah, there are some closings that are going on later today. And then great. Overall this year, I would say 40 or 45% of my sales were listings. And this is over time a number that's grown drastically. My first year when I sold $3.7 million, I would say out of the $3.7 million, maybe 1 or 2 of them were listings. And then the next year, when I sold $7.4 million, maybe, 20% of them were listings. And then now in my 5th year, I'm almost at 50% listings and 50% buyers.
And that's
something that just happens in real estate. It's not possible to get into real estate and be a listing agent. It's just not, because you don't have the experience yet. You don't have the resume. It's going to be really hard to convince a seller, list with me, because you don't really have the numbers and the track record to show that you can sell.
But you have such a strong track record with all your buyers, and that, like you said, now the cycle goes through, and then they're going to sell at some point.
Exactly. Those buyers who bought with you in the beginning, they're going to be selling eventually too. So obviously, if they were happy with your services, they're going to want to use you in your sale. So that's, pretty much how it started, but now it's turning into, a word of mouth type thing. Now I'm getting listing requests without even reaching out to these people or knowing them. A lot of them are referrals from past clients, but a lot of them are also people who, I might have sold in the building before and they saw my name. So, or they saw my name at an open house or something, or they saw my sign outside of a house. So now it's gotten to that point, but obviously it has to start with something, and it started with buyers.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're so personable. I'm sure that, you chat with people everywhere you go, just like I do. And then the next thing you know, they're like, oh, what do you do? I'm a realtor. Well, it's just kind of easy when you're really friendly and personable, I think.
Yeah, and real estate is also something that's really easy to talk about. And it's something that everyone's interested in because everyone has a vested interest in it. Even if you're renting, even if you don't own your place, you want to know what the places in your building are selling for just in case you do want to buy. Or, if you do buy and you've owned your place for the last 30 years, you probably don't really know or aren't aware of what other homes that are close to yours are selling for. So, it's something that I always find myself talking about when I'm at social events. And that's fine with me. I love talking about real estate. It's really interesting to me. And I find that I bring it up even when I'm talking with other realtors as well. There's really no way to get away from it, and I don't mind that. And that's one of the reasons that I think I found the right job for me.
Oh, I think that's because you can tell that you just love it. You absolutely love it. And if you had to say, how would you say that you're different from your competitors?
In terms of, the way that I approach a scenario, I don't know how different I am because I really don't know how other agents approach clients. But I'll tell you now that, this might be from PR, I get straight to the point. If you talk to anyone who is, on my team, if you talk to my assistants, if you talk to anyone who I work with, you'll know that, I don't mess around. And that comes in terms of, how I negotiate for my clients, but it also comes in terms of, how I help a deal get done from the beginning to the end. I just basically like getting straight to the point, not in a rude way, but in a way that doesn't waste anyone's time. So that is one way that I'd say that I'm maybe a little bit different from other agents is, I like getting straight to the point. I like being blunt and honest with people. But the other thing too is responsiveness. And I think this is probably one of the most important aspects of real estate. I always have a saying, if my clients reach out to me and they don't hear back from me within the next, I'd say 3 or 4 hours, I'd say call the cops because they're
Sorry, I don't mean to laugh, but I know what you mean. It's funny when you in business when you call people back and they say, oh, "I can't believe you called me back," and you think, "Well, this is going to be easy because if no one else is calling."
I can't tell you how often that happens. I'll get a lead and I'll call them back within the next, 3 or 4 minutes, and they'll be like, whoa, I was not expecting that. And that's just a great way to start the whole process, because you say, this is what I do. You reach out to me, I'm going to reach back out to you ASAP. So I would say my responsiveness is second to none, and it will lead to having less of a social life, and it might affect your personal life as a realtor. But I mean, it's a sacrifice you make when you sign up for real estate. You're not getting into a 9-to-5 job. You're not going to be at a place where you're just sitting behind a desk looking at a computer screen for 8 hours of the day. You're going to be in a job where you have to be on your feet 24/7, because you are working around people's free time. So you have to have that mentality. You can't think that your time is more important than anyone else's. You need to be able to respond to people as quickly as possible. And that's something that I think I've done very well. If, like I said, if a client reaches out to me and they haven't heard back from me within 3 or 4 hours, something's going on. And even if I can't give them a full answer at the time, I'll always respond to them very quickly in an email or something and say, hey, I'm at this showing for the next 3 hours or so. I'll get back to you tonight. Just so they know that, I got their request, I got their question, and I'll be getting back to them as soon as possible. And that's something that I think that if you ask any of my clients, they would all say about me, is that it's almost scary how quickly, I respond and get back to them. So I don't know if that's different from other agents, because like I said, I can't really, see what other agents do with their clients, but I know for a fact that something that my clients love about me is how, quick I am to respond to them.
It's definitely your strength. Yeah. Among many. So I just want to ask you, getting back to, your success, I know that last year you sold $12.8 million. And what are you on track to do this year?
This year we're on track to do 20. So far I've closed about, I want to say close to 16 million. And I have about 3 pending. So, my goal this year at the beginning was 20 million, and I'm pretty sure we're going to get there, if not very close.
Oh, that's fantastic. Congratulations. Wow.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm the number 1 agent in my agency. That's out of, I want to say, like 256 agents. I'm the number 1 agent in my company in all of Illinois. So it's something that I don't take for granted, but it's something that I definitely use for my motivation. I like looking at those numbers, and I like seeing what other people, my second and third place competitions, are doing, because it really motivates me to keep going. That's the thing about real estate that is unlike any other job, is that your production is about as public as it can be. When you're talking to an accountant, or you're talking to a lawyer, or you're talking to a doctor, you can't look online and see what their success rate is in terms of their patients. You can't see, how often an accountant screws up their numbers. These are things that are, not public record. But with real estate, everything that we do, and I guess this is a good and bad thing, is public. And for me, it's a good thing, because it's motivating for my team members to be able to see my production, for my clients to be able to see what kind of numbers I do. So for me, I use it as motivation. But at the same time, it is kind of daunting to know that your production and what you do is out there for everyone to see. So that's something that I think is a positive and a negative, but I try to use it as a positive.
Yeah. Now, I know with all that success, you do believe in giving back to your community as well. So can you tell me a little bit about how you're giving back?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I think this is something I got to give my parents credit for. They always made it very important, how important philanthropy is. And that's something that I still take in today. So with my team, what I usually try to do, at least, once a quarter, even more if I possibly can, is I try to get them out to volunteer at different events. Last year we went to Misericordia and, worked for their food line. The year before that we went to the Great Harvest. Misericordia is kind of like, it's like a home for mentally disadvantaged people. Basically, if you have a child who needs special help or special care, it's kind of like a town. It's called Misericordia.
Oh, that's
and
fantastic.
It's in Chicago. It's in the north side. It's an amazing organization that basically takes care of a lot of people. So it's something that I think is dear to my heart, because I do have a couple of family members who are, mentally disadvantaged.
And everyone in the world has been touched by mental illness. We all know someone or have someone in our family. So, and it's, it's one of those things where people don't really want to talk about it, but that's so beautiful that you're doing that. Thank you for that.
Thanks. So that's one thing. And then I do have one of my best friends is very involved in Alzheimer's Association, Alzheimer's awareness. His grandmother passed away from Alzheimer's. So he started an association called the Maybell Foundation. And I do whatever I can to basically, help out in that sense as well. I try to give as much as I can. to basically help raise awareness. And something I also like to do, but I try to stay away from, is helping pets and animals. I definitely give money to, organizations like Paws, and I have a dog, so, animals are, my heart. I could never actually physically do it, because I'm telling you, Suzanne, if I worked or if I volunteered at a Paws or, any type of animal association, there's no question I'd be going home with like 5 or 6 dogs. I can't be around animals.
Me too. You're like, just
I can't be around them without wanting to take them home. I'll definitely give. I'll write checks, but I can't physically do it, because I will seriously have a house of 70 dogs if I do.
I know, and then you're working 16 hours a day, so it's not really conducive.
Exactly.
I totally relate to that. I never really was a dog person. I always said, I'm not a dog person. And then we got a dog, and now I'm like ridiculously in love with our dog. It's like, it's really, I can't even explain. It's embarrassing.
That's something I also love about real estate as well, is it's very conducive to having a dog. I have a dog, and I used to work a 9-to-5 type job before I got into real estate, and I would get dog walkers, and, they would come for 20 minutes of the day, and they would, put them back in my place, and I'd come back home 5 or 6 hours later to see them ready to go again. Yeah. So real estate, since I make my own schedule, one of the many things I love about real estate, since I drive my own career, I could actually hang out with him. He's here right now staring at me while we're talking. So that's one of the things I love about real estate, is I could actually hang out with my dog.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we're really running out of time here, but this has been such a great interview. It's wonderful getting to know you a little bit and learning all about your career and your success. And just let me ask you, how can people contact you if they're listening in here and they want to get a hold of you? What's the best way to do that?
Sure. I would check out my website. It's my last name, Lewisy, Lewis, LewisChicagoRealestate.com. Or feel free to email me at Lewis, Lewisy, ChicagoRealestate@gmail.com. Or find me on Facebook under Danny Lewis. That's one of the things about being a millennial and being, in this, younger generation of realtors is you should be able to get in touch with me very easily. And if you can't, then I'm doing something wrong. So if you Google Danny Lewis. Yeah. Danny Lewis, or Chicago. If you go to my website, you'll be able to find me. Easily.
Yeah, isn't that funny? My brother was also a realtor for many years, and sometimes he would be shocked at people saying, "Well, I didn't know how to get a hold of you." And he says, "I'm everywhere. Drive down the road, you'll see my signs." Anyways,
if you can't get a hold of me, I'm not doing something right. There's no question about that.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much, Danny Lewis in Chicago. It has been a wonderful interview, and I really appreciate your time today.
Well, thanks so much for having me on the show. It's a great opportunity, and I really appreciate your time as well.
This has been another episode of Real Estate Game Changers Radio with your host, Suzanne Doyle-Ingram. To hear all episodes featuring our hand-picked real estate game changers, visit us online at www.realestategamechangersradio.com.